Our state's elected officials are well known. But what about those behind-the-scenes movers and shakers in California politics? We'll ask someone who annually compiles a list of the most influential unelected policymakers at the state capitol. John Howard, editor of Capital Weekly.
Additional funding for the Maddy Report made possible by a grant from The Wonderful Company, harvesting health and happiness around the world. From the California Channel at the state capitol and the Maddy Institute, it's the Maddy Report with Executive Director of the Maddy Institute, Mark Keppler.
Welcome, I'm Mark Keppler with the Maddy Institute. In any state capital, there are those key power brokers who work behind the scenes to get things done. They're well known to those in the know. Our guest is John Howard, editor of Capital Weekly, a well-read publication that annually publishes a list of California's top 100 power players. Welcome back to the Maddy Report.
Thank you, Mark. I'm happy to be here, and God bless you for saying well-read when you talk about Capital Weekly. Okay.
It's true. It's a very well-read magazine. Anyway, so you've noted that sparks are sometimes fly when these things come out. The diverse reactions on folks. What did you hear this year?
It's funny. We didn't hear a lot of that this year. There were some people who were not on the list that were on last year. Partly that's a matter of strategy. We want to shake things up a bit and get some new blood onto the list and not have sort of a sense of entitlement from the year to year. A couple people that were off did call me and in very spirited, robust language wondered what was going on. And we sorted all that out. I think the biggest issue going into this list that I had was who was going to be number one. Nancy McFadden, who had been number one for quite some time, passed away.
Right. He was the chief of staff for the governor.
Yes. So what were we going to do with number one? And so my thought was Diana Dooley, who was Governor Brown's first public appointee when he was elected in 2010 and had been with him in various capacities since 1975. She was Health and Human Services Secretary. She was just named to be the cabinet executive secretary. So I thought that would make an obvious number one, and I ran that by people, and absolutely nobody agreed with me. They said Angus Brown should be number one again because she, after Nancy died, sort of stepped back into the horseshoe.
We're going to talk about that in a second. Let me ask you this. Your list is a little bit subjective. I mean,
yes.
It's kind of talking
Truly
to folks
is.
and not totally empirical. Are there any new criteria that you use this year?
I think the criteria are very similar to what we've always used. What we try to do is ask people who they think in the capital community are sort of outsized to their title and their jobs. They may have a fancy title and they may have a fancy job, but what do they do with that? And that is very subjective, as you say. And so in this list, we had several people who were not on last year's list, but who quite clearly belonged after we talked to as many people as we could. So the criteria is subjective, but we're basically looking at people who are effective in their jobs, non-electeds, obviously, who are effective.
And you've got a lot of contacts in the Capitol, and so you can find out
yes.
who really are the power players.
And some of them still talk to me, so it's good. It's good for the list.
So some people get dropped off the list, new ones are added, you said. I'm imagining that some folks that get dropped off the list are a little upset their name didn't appear on this year's list. How do you mollify those folks? And can you tell us what their response was? Did they accept your explanation?
Some did not get in touch with me at all. A few did. But it's funny, the people who were off the list this time had been on before and off before and back again. So there is sort of a revolving merry-go-round, sort of a revolving door quality to this.
They're expecting to be on next year.
I think so, yeah. Not that I've told them, but yeah.
Their expectations are. Well, we're going to talk about the top 10 in a moment,
sure.
But I wanted to ask you about, you said about 20% of the folks in this year's list are newcomers to the top 100. Can you tell us about some of them that are new to this year's list in the top 100? Not in the top 10, but
sure.
11 through 100. Why were they added to the list?
Some of them were added, again, and people we talked to said, you really got to talk to so-and-so. That person, you may not know it before, but it's in the horseshoe very close to the governor. And now
the horseshoe, you can explain to our audience,
is sort of the inner sanctum of the executive office suite for the governor. It's over here in the Capitol.
And it looks like a horseshoe. I mean, the offices are shaped in a horseshoe.
That's true.
Arrangement,
yes.
Yeah, okay.
And so there are people there who weren't on the list before that we didn't know about. And so this year there was sort of an educational quality to this year's list, believe me. One of the best thing that we learned this year, I think, title-wise, is that the governor likes his top staff with the titles secretary in them. And the press secretary for the governor hadn't been on the list before because I thought he answered to a communications director. No, the press secretary is the communications director and is up with the governor in the morning and with him all day and at night leaves him, and that person belonged on the list and was on the list this year and has not been on before.
So, you have a happy press secretary.
We have a happy press secretary.
Which is good since you're in that business, media business.
Still doesn't call me back though, but it's okay.
I'm sure he or she is happy. Well, up next, we're actually going to talk about who are the 10 most influential behind-the-scenes players in California government. That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. I'm Mark Keppler with the Maddy Institute. So who are the 10 most powerful players in Sacramento politics? We're talking with John Howard, editor of Capital Weekly, who publishes the annual list of the top behind-the-scenes players in California. We have the magazine with us. You can show that to our audience. This is what we're talking about, and we're talking about the top 10 on this list.
And this is not a shameless plug.
Not a shameless plug.
Okay, good.
This is what you want to order if you're really interested in all top 100. We're going to focus on the top 10. So at number 10 is Elaine Howell, who's the state auditor, frequent guest actually on our program, so our audience knows her well. So why is she on the list?
She's always on the list at some point or another. I mean, she's at some level or another, she's on the list by virtue of her position. She's very aggressive. She's managed to please the Joint Legislative Audit Committee and somewhat for many, many years, which is not the easiest thing to do. She's done some really tough audits. This past year or two, she really got into it with UC. There were issues there with UC's finances. There were questions about whether UC was forthright with her. She's dogged. You don't mess with Elaine Howell. So she was a pretty easy call for 10.
And she was taking on the regents of the UC and,
yes.
The top officer over there. And it's interesting. She has quite. She seems very pleasant. We
she
talked
is,
to her on the show. So
if she's not after us, she's pleasant.
We're not being audited, so that's good. So at number 9, our audience also knows this person very well. Actually, one of 2 people in the top 10 that are from the San Joaquin Valley, and that's Mac Taylor.
Oh yeah.
The California's nonpartisan legislative analyst.
Yeah.
He's retiring at the end of this year.
Yes.
Your office, I think, described him very nicely. You said it's the go-to place for anyone looking to understand the nitty-gritty of the California budget, fiscal impact on budget initiatives, and an array of budget-related topics. I don't think anybody would disagree with that.
I agree.
So Mac Taylor, why is he on the list?
First and foremost, Mac Taylor is really easy to understand when he talks about fiscal issues. That's great.
Also, it's interesting, we have him on the show, we talk about the budget, and most people's eyes would glaze over.
Yeah.
Mac makes it so interesting.
He makes it easy,
very
and
approachable.
we like that too. So also, he's very, he makes people at the legislative analysts available. The individual analysts who handle particular policy areas, healthcare, transportation, social services. But if you call them and ask them, like we do conferences, for example, if they'd like to participate publicly, or I'm doing a story, can you talk for the record? They do. They often do. And that wasn't always true before with the ledge analyst. The person who was the actual ledge analyst was the main voice.
Right.
But Mac has sort of spread it around.
He's
It's pretty
very
cool.
good. He had a meeting, he told me, with his group, and he said, how many people have been on the Maddy Report? He said like 2/3 of the room raised their hands.
I love
So
it,
we're
yeah.
always going back to them because they're the experts in various areas.
Absolutely.
So yeah, a good person. At number 8, up from number 10 last year, is Alan Zarenberg, the president and CEO of the California Chamber of Commerce, another person we have on the program. Consistent top 10 power player.
Yeah. I ask people every year, should he be on the list again? We're getting tired of Alan Zarenberg. Should he be on the list? And they all say yes, he definitely should be on the list.
They've got that jobs killer bills every year they come out with.
Jobs killers, jobs pack. They've got election
extremely people say, California is a very democratic state, but the chamber has been incredibly successful with these job killer bills. They knock them out.
That's really why he's on the list. They're very good. They're very savvy election strategists. They target mod Democrats. They're not just although business-wise, they have classic business, sort of the Republican bent on business, but they're tight with money except for campaigns. They spend money in campaigns. They spend their political money. They're all over the place. So they're a major player in Sacramento. And they have been for, 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, let's talk about number 7 on the list. Again, moving up from number 8 last year, Eric Bauman, who's the chair of the California Democratic Party, is taking over for John Burton. And there's lots of stories about John Burton, but let's talk about Eric Bauman. Why is he on the list? Why do you think he's so important?
Well, we think he's important because part of this is because he was a labor leader in LA, and he basically called the shots in LA, and that in itself is a big deal. Then going to the state Democratic Party as chair. It's a funny thing, we didn't have Burton on the list. When he was Democratic Party, I just realized this, you were talking, but we have Bauman on the list, and he sort of combines both. I think he's a major labor figure in California. And now he really does a strategy for the Democratic Party. He's hands-on, he really gets engaged. He knows how to move money around. He's
you
very
think about
aggressive.
registered voters. I mean, the Democrats have what, almost 44% of the registered voters in California Democratic, and the Republicans are down at what, 25%, and no party preference, independent voters
they're
also 20.
They're down lower, and yet California has a heavy Republican presence at the local level.
Right.
I believe I'm right when I say that California's local officials, there are more Republicans than there are Democrats.
I think
we
you're
have this
correct.
perception of a blue state, but the reality is there's a lot going on in California. Republicans are part of that.
Okay, at number 6, a study from last year is also number 6, is Robbie Hunter, the president of the State Building and Construction Trades Council, labor leader, still acting as a labor leader.
Yeah, that's right.
So why is he on the list?
The Building Construction Trades Council, they do all kinds of political, they're really heavy on political issues. They are a funder of them. They have lots of troops that go on the ground that get involved in these ballot issues. This year, the attempt to repeal Prop 6, that's one of their things. Last year, or earlier this year rather, the fight over infrastructure, funding that, they were involved in that. Anything building big projects, Building Construction Trades Council is there.
And they can put their boots on the ground. I mean, you know, they can get people to turn out the vote.
They can, and they're like the firefighters. They're all over the place, and they got a lot of dough.
And so they are relevant in state politics.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, up next, the countdown continues. Top 5. That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. I'm Mark Keppler with the Maddy Institute. We're talking with Capital Weekly editor John Howard. Yeah. You can show our audience.
My shameless plug, it's time right now.
Showing the top 10 most powerful behind-the-scenes players in California. You can actually cover the top 100. We're focusing on the top 10. At number 5 is someone new to the top 10, Mona Pasquale, who's Governor Brown's appointments secretary. Yeah. What's an appointment secretary and why is she important?
She vets all of the people that Brown appoints to positions in state government. And so she is the person you have to get by. If you want to work for the administration, she's the person.
Or be appointed to any kind of panel or commission, anything.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of
you.
commissions.
Yes. And all of us have things in our background we would rather not have everybody know, okay? And that's probably a good thing. Well, I don't work for government. I don't know about you, but...
I'm taking the 5th.
But Mona is essential for that, and she's very much on the inside. She kind of knows all the secrets, and she's very discreet, obviously, and she's also good. She's got good political instincts on her own, and Brown, I think, likes that. He likes her ability to do the vetting and the security stuff, but she has good political instincts.
And she also served apparently as the lieutenant governor back in 2009 for a short period.
That's right.
So she has that on her resume as well.
Yeah.
So number 4, newcomer of sorts to the top 10, and that's Michael Cohen, the director of the California Department of Finance. I guess he who has the gold makes the rules.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was gone last year. Okay. He was on the year before that. He was actually ill, and last year we had, oh gosh, Amy, I'm blanking on her name, but she was a deputy director at finance, sort of a number 2 person, and she was on the list last year. Our theory was that you have to have somebody from finance. They write the governor's budget. So we had her this year. Michael Cohen is back as director, and I think he's going somewhere else too. I think he's already announced he's leaving. But
well, it's interesting. You know, the California budget is what, about 138 billion, but if you add the federal dollars and all the other dollars in it, it jumps up to 201 billion dollars.
Totally, yeah, it's a lot of dollars.
That's a chunk of change.
Yeah,
that's a lot of money. Yeah. A lot of money. And by the way, there's also an issue going on now with the census. I assume the Department of Finance is going to be pretty involved in that because they don't want it to be undercounted because then California loses money.
That's absolutely true. The undercount, in fact, we just happen to be doing a story on that right now, but the undercount, the dreaded word is undercount. The census is developing right now, obviously for 2020. It's a snapshot in time as of April 2020. The state has committed $90 million, I think it is, and there's more than that. There's some money that's been donated, over $100 million in California to make sure we have a good census.
And that's where the whole issue of, you know, are they going to ask your citizenship on the census, and will that scare people away from, and that may result in an undercount. Okay, steady it. The third most powerful person in California politics and government is Mary Nichols.
Never heard of her, never.
Right, the chair of the California Air Resources Board, or the ARB. So why is she on the list again?
I think for the reason she was on all the last time before, she's been sort of our environmental guru in California for years and years and years and years and years. But she's chair of the Air Resources Board, which is, I think, the premier air quality enforcer in the country, and they make rules.
She does have a national reputation.
Oh, absolutely. And the entire Northeast follows our lead on many things. And she's very well, she used to be an NRDC attorney. She knows the lay of the land. She's got Brown's trust completely. She's involved in every major global warming fight there is. And of course, that's close to Brown's heart, so she's right in there. Sure.
Yeah. So at number 2 is another person with a Valley connection, and by the way, a founding member of the Maddy Institute, Diana Dooley, former Secretary of Health and Human Services and current Chief of Staff of the Governor's Office. And I have an interesting story about Diana. When she stepped off our board, is when the governor appointed her as Secretary of HHS. And actually, she was the first appointment in Governor Brown's this most recent go-around.
That's right,
She
yeah.
was the first appointment.
Yeah.
And she had to call me and say, sorry, I have to step off the board because we're a nonpartisan institute. So anyway, a little connection with Diana Dooley.
Not only was she the first appointment, she was appointed before he took office.
Yeah.
So
He was very clear he wanted her.
He wanted her. For all kinds of different reasons. Diana Dooley, as Health and Human Services Secretary, was also chair of the board of Covered California. So that
the Affordable Care Act's implementation in California,
putting that in
Obamacare.
California, implementing that, defining the market. She was at the center of that for many years. She's also very close to Brown. So whether she's Health and Human Services Secretary or Executive Secretary, she's close to Brown, has his ear.
And secretary is an important title in the Brown administration.
Very much, yeah.
Remember that,
That's right.
But it's interesting when a lot of people look at the implementation of the ACA around the country, Obamacare, they point to California as one of the successes, that it was rolled out very well. And Diana Dooley has a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
So the most influential behind-the-scenes person, someone we talked about
Is
earlier.
John Howard. No, that's not on the
right?
list. No. Okay, it's a mistake.
Well, then you may need to talk to the First Lady about that, because you've got her as the #1 person, and Gus Brown.
Yeah. Again, this was an interesting call for me. I didn't think this was the right. I was thinking of Diana Dooley as #1, but I ran that by a lot of people who actually know a lot more about the horseshoe, about the inside than I do, and it was a good call. She had stepped back temporarily, going to Calusa, spending a lot of time on family issues on the ranch and doing sort of stuff.
The ranch.
The ranch.
It's pretty Spartan, I understand.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Not that I'd been there. I saw a photo that looked like a one-room cabin on stilts or something. So she does a lot of that. She came back after Nancy McFadden, who had been executive secretary. Yeah. So she came back in and took over. The reason I think she was #1, the defining reason for me, was that she was responsible for, at the end of the day, for giving the approval for Diana to come back as executive secretary. So I thought if she had that clout, then she should be #1.
Quite the team, quite the team.
Yeah.
Well, up next, 2019 is going to bring us a new governor. And while we have to wait until the fall of 2019 to see who became the key players that year, we're going to hazard a guess who they might be and why they might be on next year's list. That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. I'm Mark Keppler with the Maddy Institute. We're talking with Capital Weekly editor John Howard about the top 10 most powerful behind-the-scenes players in California politics and government. Some of the folks on this year's list aren't going to appear probably on next year's list because we're going to have a new governor, new issues. So who might be the key players in 2019? Regardless of how you feel about Governor Brown,
Sure.
No question, he's been the 800-pound gorilla of state politics for some time. So members of administration are going to be moving out, new people are moving in. One of the questions is the legislature going to be assert itself more than it has in the past with a new governor? And will that change who the influential people are?
You know, it's hard to answer that. I mean, my guess is the answer is yes, it will assert itself more. I'm only basing that really in sort of a gut instinct. I think that there will be changes in the leadership obviously in the governor's office. Some of those people may want to stay, some may not. There's sort of a thing going on now called waiting for the next governor. Who will that, if it's Cox, if it's Newsom, they're going to come in with their own people. And so whoever they bring in is probably going to be on our list. Proximity to the governor and trust of the governor sort of defines the top of this list. It has in years past.
Okay. Union leaders are consistently appearing on this list throughout the top 100, but certainly even in the top 10.
Yeah.
And they say that money is the mother's milk of politics.
Yeah.
You have this recent Supreme Court decision in Janus that looks like it's going to have a significant effect on union resources, probably deplete them to some extent. So what effect will that have on the labor movement's influence in state politics?
I think it will deplete their resources. I think publicly they say that it won't. It certainly energized the unions, worried about that decision, not being able to collect agency fees, not being able to get that funding automatically, have it paycheck deducted, for example. That's got to cut into their revenue. But the other side of that is they were waiting for that. They thought it would come. And they think they've taken preparations to deal with that. And certainly they're energized and motivated.
Yeah, I think that's going to be more grassroots as opposed to automatically getting the dues. They have to go talk to their members a little more. The problem for unions is, though, that they have to represent everyone in the bargaining unit covered by the contract, whether or not they're paying union dues or agency fees. So, it's money going out, but money may not be coming in. And
it's always tough for them to do that. I agree. And one of the hard things for them, I think, is to, at least with this issue, is to make sure they have they retain the enthusiasm of their membership.
It's voluntary now.
Yeah.
So members are going to get the benefit, but they don't have to pay for it
Yeah.
if they don't want to. So that's going to be problematic for unions. I think. I think I've seen studies. They're saying maybe 20 or 30% reduction in dues when this happened in places like Wisconsin and things like that. So I guess
That's a lot.
We'll wait and see. Another factor that's going to drive people that's on the list, typically, it seems like, are the issues that are each year that come out. What issues do you think are going to be big next year that's going to be kind of pushing who's most influential in state politics in 2019?
I think some of that is going to depend on what happens in D.C. I think environmental issues in California never go away. That will be here next year. I think the whole notion of California versus the feds, that's not going away. Last count, I think there are 26 lawsuits out there or something the state has filed against the feds. Clearly, immigration isn't going away. I think if I had to pick any one single issue, I think there's going to be a push for health care stronger than there was now. We may have, next year may be the health care debate. Gavin Newsom has signaled that he's interested in having the debate. John Cox, I think, would be interested in the debate. I think this would be an issue for him. I think there's going to be a lot of discussion depending on how the politics works out. But I think healthcare would be a big issue.
Let's talk about that. So if you think that it's going to be the environment, the lawsuits, immigration, healthcare. So who are the key players then? It would seem like one would be the Attorney General is going to carry a pretty significant role.
I think the Attorney General is at the center of a lot
of people in his office. He's the elected office, but people who work with him.
No, that's absolutely true. And to the extent that this, we're involved in lawsuits as they relate to the government, they relate to the feds, those are the high visibility things. But there are other issues out there as well. I remember when Brown was Attorney General, he filed, I think it was against San Bernardino County for failing to implement its county plan in an environmentally proper way. I think you're going to see more of that. I think the environment always plays a role here. And specifically, whatever they are, could be anything. But that issue, the environmental issue, will be big next year.
And if you think healthcare is going to be important, I assume then that who's ever appointed as Secretary of HHS and maybe the people that work with them or the people that they listen to are also going to be pretty influential.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think you're going to see rates going up. That's happened. I think twice over the past year. I think they're going to happen again. They may have already been announced actually. So healthcare costs are going to go up in some fashion through Covered California. I think Medi-Cal is going to be expanded still more. It went from 6 or 7 million people covered to over 13 million, 14 million.
And we didn't even talk about affordable housing. So
I'll
leave that alone. I want to thank John Howard, the editor of Capital Weekly, for joining us. If you want to stay up on state and local politics, you can follow the Maddy Institute on Facebook, Twitter, or log on to our website at maddyinstitute.org. This is Mark Keppler for the Maddy Report. Thanks for joining us.
The views expressed in the Maddy Report are those of the individuals participating in the program and do not necessarily reflect those of the California Channel or the Maddy Institute. If you'd like to share your thoughts about the points and opinions expressed on the Maddy Report, visit our website at maddyinstitute.org.